Hola, hola. I taught myself Spanish for 1 year, and there are many mistakes that I made during that process. So I want to be able to share those with those of you that have just started to learn Spanish or would like to learn Spanish so that you don't make the same mistake again. I rely too much on comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is a method where you try to understand what's being told to you by the context that's behind it. So, for instance, that could be actions of the hand, that could be images, that could be different ways of providing you with enough context that you can try to dissect the meaning of the word or what's being told to you by yourself. I love this method. However, personally, I think that that shouldn't be your only way of learning the language. When I first started to learn Spanish, I really didn't know how to learn a language. My previous languages, English, Cantonese, Chinese, and also Urdu, were taught to me. I was taught these languages. I didn't actually have to actively learn them. So I didn't know how somebody actually learns a language. So I just Googled, and what showed up for Spanish for me was comprehensible input and obviously Dreaming Spanish, which is an amazing channel. I would highly, highly recommend if you're learning Spanish to start out with them. But the method is that you stick with it for a few months without producing the language, without actively speaking. I think that's where the problem lies. I do think personally, my experience with it is that if you combine input and output together, you can fast track your process. You can fast track the way that you learn the language. And so therefore, I don't think that I needed to spend so much time just doing comprehensible input. I could have definitely started speaking and started writing, started producing in this language much earlier than I was told to, or that I actually did. Another mistake was focusing on learning isolated vocabulary, including words that I would actually never use in daily life. I remember once I was speaking to an Ecuadorian lady. I was trying to hint the dishwasher to her. And I was like, this thing that washes the dishes and everything. And she told me how it's called in Spanish, but she also told me she actually didn't also know how it was called in Spanish. What I would rather do is sit down and reflect on how I like to speak. What topics do I like to talk about? How do I build my sentences? And using that same manner and using that same method or that information, I would then go into the foreign language and find the relevant sentences, find the relevant words, and learn them. Focus my energy on learning them because I know that's how I like to express myself. And that's how I like to express myself in my mother tongue, in English, whatever it is for you. So that's why I need to be focusing more attention in knowing that these are the words and these are the sentences that I definitely need to learn. The third mistake was I was memorizing vocabs instead of just exposing myself. I didn't really have a lot of time every single day to learn Spanish. And the time that I had, the limited time that I had, I was using half of it memorizing vocabs. But I am not a fan of using Anki. I'm not a fan of doing flashcards. I don't do it. I've never done it. I've not done it for Spanish and I don't do it for German because it doesn't work for me. Don't think that you need to actively memorize vocab. It's enough if you expose yourself to those vocabs. You don't have to actively sit down and be like, this word means this word means this, because number one, you're learning it out of context. And number two, you're actually taking time away from actively using this vocab and consuming it in another context, in a relevant context. Again, I would focus more on just exposing myself to the word and actively using them. Number four, I was trying to learn all changes in the verb forms all at once. In Spanish, for I, you, we, it changes, right? So it's quiero, quieres, queremos. It changes for each subject. But my previous languages that I already knew didn't really have these changes. I didn't really have a blueprint that existed in my brain. This was very overwhelming for me in the beginning because I was trying to remember all of these changes for all of these subjects, for all of these verbs at the same time. And I think that's not needed, especially in the beginning. I think in the beginning, what you should be focusing on is learning maybe one to two instead of learning all at once. Focus on just talking about yourself and talking about somebody else. So learning the changes in the verb for I and you, because think about it. In the beginning, you're actually really talking about yourself or you're talking to somebody. It's not that likely that you're going to be talking to multiple people at the same time in the beginning. So learning that conjugation is not really necessary in the beginning, but rather focusing your energy on what you know you want to be able to use that language for immediately is so much more productive. And I wish I had done that, because it would have really saved me the mental stress of learning all of these changes in the beginning, because it can be really stressful for somebody that didn't have that blueprint before. With time, the more you are exposed to that change in a different context, to that verb change in a different context, it comes naturally. Trust me, it will come naturally. You don't have to force yourself to memorize it or to practice it day in, day out, because when you do that out of context, it's not going to stay and it's going to sound unnatural. So you want to be able to let your brain absorb it by exposing yourself to it more and more in different contexts. Those were the few mistakes that I made in Spanish when I first started learning it. Obviously, there were many more, but I don't want to make this video too long. I hope that this helped for those of you that have not started or would like to learn Spanish. And trust me that it's a journey, but you will get there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Happy to help, happy to give advice, happy to share my experience and for you guys to learn from my experience so that you can avoid making the same mistakes that I did. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.